Hey, what's up, friends? Grant Baldwin here. Hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. Hope you're hanging in there. Today, we're joined by my friend, Mr. Scott Stratten, and we're going to be talking about his views on the world of speaking. We've been having a lot of these conversations. If you've been following along with different speakers and those in the speaking industry, just hearing kind of how they're adapting to this, how they're thinking about it, how they're approaching it, what the long-term perspective looks like in the speaking industry. Scott has been in the speaking game for a long time. He's been on the podcast numerous times. Friend of the program, and I'm sure what we're going to get today is going to be fascinating. So just looking here at the contrast of how much hair one of us has to the other here is striking.
Well, look, you can do a quarantine one way or you can do it another way. And we're pretty much the examples of both of those. Yes.
I hear, I've seen and talked to a couple different speakers who are saying, I don't have any gigs for a while. This is a chance for me to kind of experiment, maybe grow it out, shave it, cut it down. Yeah. So I think you and I are still kind of par for the course of what we would normally do.
This is my natural state. Yeah. It's like people are like, oh, your beard's going to grow your hair. I'm like, yeah, that's me normally. It's like, this isn't planned. This is just lack of initiative to cut things. And
this is just a Thursday.
It is a Thursday. Right.
Now we were talking right before we went live here. I asked you how you're doing. So Scott, we'll open the can of worms. How you doing, man?
As I try to say this as kind as I can, because how the heck do you think I'm doing? Like, it's people, it's one of those things. It's like, do you have to say all things considered at this point? Like, it's just like, no matter what, when people say, how you doing? We're assuming you're just, other than what's happening in this world. You're like, well, it's wow, man. It's a different world. It's something that, I never thought that my identity professionally would disappear, for whatever amount of time, that'll eventually be. But, that's one of the things that, I know you've said it in the past and I've said it in the past, that one of the things about speaking is that isn't really supposed to be the profession necessarily. You're an expert who speaks. That's who gets booked is right. People. So this is the time for the expertise to be shown in other ways. It's also the best way to, and I know it's in your awesome book as well, about you're building a platform, you're building a following, and the gig is, of course, the payoff, the victory, especially for people like you and I. That's where I thrive, but that isn't everything. So that part has gone away, and it's certainly greatly upsetting. And sorry, my of course my FaceTime is going off right now, so excuse me.
You're good.
You can hear me okay still?
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, my phone's ringing in my ear. I apologize for that.
Well, I'm curious, like to that end though, do you feel like, because you are someone who, we've talked about, there's a bunch of different speaking business models. There's people that do a handful of gigs and do numerous other things. Those that do a lot of gigs and nothing else. You're definitely in the latter of like, I just want to do keynotes. I don't, do some books. I do a podcast. I do some other stuff, but like the keynote is what I live for. So do you feel like in some ways, like you're like, there's a, I don't know, like, I don't want to make this sound hokey, but like, do you feel like you've lost part of your identity, or you feel like you're missing something right now, or like, where's your headspace at right now?
Yes. To all the above what you said. I it's actually like, it's, this is all in context too, because outside of us talking about speaking, there are, bigger issues in the world than whether Scott's going to be on stage or any of us are going to be on stage. There's a human, core element to all of this, but speaking about speaking, and keeping that in perspective. I grieved last week. I was really got to a point where I realized, okay, I don't have to be a speaker. That's my definition of my success. Success is our family, our we have a shelter, we have a home, we have this, and all of those things are part that makes me Scott. And the problem is, because of my positioning in the industry and the fact of, I've done 500 keynotes in 10 years, that was you can't help that being part of your identity. But it's actually the things that you don't think about, or even the annoyances that you miss right now. Just like everybody else outside of speaking, it's those small things. Like I miss the way too early AV check. Right. I missed the 7 a.m. AV check for a 4 p.m. keynote, all the things I used to complain about, the pre-conference call where nothing really gets said that's interesting, or all those things, those are the parts I miss. Obviously the stage is my home.
Right.
I'm a performer. The stage is my home, and all of us in performance, let alone just speaking, are hurting on that side, especially the creatives, because that's your outlet.
Yeah.
But the issue is looking at my world, because speaking, and I'm sorry, just going off a tangent here, but this is kind of, there's an important sectioning of the industry that, I honestly think that my version of keynotes, which is the big conferences, the big annual expos, like associations and brands, but the big things they do, which is where I go speak, are gone, and are gone for a long time. Like, I think those type of keynotes, my world is gone, and it'll be the second last industry to recover. And because the last industry, I think, will be cruises that to recover in all this. But the second last are going to be these large, incredibly large gatherings, and that's because you're seeing that with sports and with concerts. And what's going to happen with this? I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV. But reading all the stuff, I've been nonstop for a month talking to people in the industry, and from venues to medical professionals to speakers to bureaus. Yeah. And what I think is going to happen with all of this, when you look at all the patterns and all the models, is that the last thing to come back will be this will be gradual coming back. Sure. And they're still going to ban these bigger gatherings for a long time. Now, that doesn't say people won't be able to speak at it. And if your bread and butter are workshops, if your bread and butter are leadership meetings, gatherings, retreats, smaller gatherings, that's different. That might come back for. But for me, the big kind of marquee keynotes that my whole life has been based on, I'm looking well into 2021, where I'm going to see any traction of that coming back. And it's not an alarmist thing. It's planning for the worst and hoping for the best, because there's another phase to this as well. Because all of my gigs that I had that were in March and April, all the spring ones coming into the summer, they've all been rebooked for the fall. Yeah. Though they won't happen in the fall. That's the thing. And people are like, well, it's encouraging the rebooking. I'm like, based on what data? They're just bumping, because what's happening is they're bumping because then they're enacting the clause in the contract of the acts of God clause, where they can bump it if it can be an agreeable date. So everybody's like, yeah, we can agree. We're all scrambling, but not one person is looking at it saying, I don't mean not one person, but people aren't looking at it saying, oh, what happens when those get rescheduled again, or those get canceled? You got money tied up in speaking bureaus that are being held. You got speakers who have, like myself, 6 figures in gigs canceled in the past couple of weeks, that money is kind of sitting there in escrow. Yeah. And it's a really crazy time. And I just think that we need to be honest about it, that this is the time. And I'm not saying rush to the webinars, rush to the virtual things, because putting out a substandard product virtually will hurt your in-person speaking down the road. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, we have a new normal right now, and nobody will tell us how long that normal is, nor do we know what the normal will be when all this is, quote, said and done. Yeah. And that's where I'm looking.
Well, I mean, to that end, like again, like you said, nobody has any idea how this is going to play out. Is this going to be months? Is this going to be through the rest of the year? I know, we've had a lot of public and private conversations with other speakers and those in the industry, and everyone's kind of got their guess. Everyone's kind of making their best guess at this point of what's going to happen and how this is going to play out. And like you said, I think it's certainly going to have some long-term implications, because even if, whoever makes the decision and decides, like, all right, we're back, continue, I think everyone's going to be like, are we sure? Like, I mean,
exactly.
I hug someone, but are we sure? Like, are we sure about this?
Because also what we haven't seen yet are going to be if Vegas was open right now, I would put all my money on the lawsuits coming out at events. Okay. Yeah. Because of large events were some of the first things that started spreading. They pinpointed the events, and there's one in Boston, there's one in San Francisco, there's 2 in Vegas that are like, these are people came internationally to hear, got it. And do you not think those events are going to get sued? Yeah. Right. That's going to be the problem. And because those lawsuits then affect insurance. No events are being insured right now. There's no way an event's being insured right now. Insurance companies are, of course, scrambling themselves, unless you only sell car insurance and you're making a killing right now because nobody's driving. But the event insurance is a huge cost to things, right? Yeah. And so that's a whole part. We have associations that won't survive this because of the money that was tied up within their event cancellation. And if that hotel doesn't work with them and the members insist on their registration fees back, there is a deficit there in the middle that cannot be, there's no endless pit of money. So on usually pretty much very tight budgets as it is. And we have to realize that some of those also may be gone. And I don't want to come off as this doom and gloom thing. I want to come off as a realist in this, saying that speaking is one of our ways that we can make a living, right, but understanding right now that we have to do other things, acting as if that part, if big conferences are your thing, will not be back for at least the near future.
So I've heard from several different speakers who, like yourself, a big part of their business is speaking at big conferences, big conventions, big association events. And again, it's kind of TBD if or when those are going to come back. And so I've heard from some speakers that initially are kind of like, I'll just kind of ride it out. It is what it is. Either this will pass or I will pass type of thing. And others who are like from day one going, nope, we got to like pivot. We got to change, whether it's a virtual thing or I got to work on a different, online product or whatever it may be. Where's your head at currently as far as, because so much of your business is a live in-person big keynote, are you trying to think about the virtual route? Or are you thinking like, the virtual route is not the same as the in-person thing? Well, how are you thinking? How are you approaching this currently?
Yeah. And this is the thing. One of the things that I would really love people to hear first is wherever you're at right now, that's okay. Because one of the problems right now, it's either like, okay, you got to pivot and create all this new product. And if you're just in a point of just survival right now, and you're going to feel guilt about not being productive, that is not a good thing. But if your other side of things, which is if you feel better about things by being productive, then you do that. There is no one hard, fast rule to get through this type of issue, going through this whole pandemic that we're dealing with. Okay, so we have one issue when it comes to that. Whatever your normal is you've made right now, that's fine. That should be okay. Yeah. We haven't pivoted to virtual yet because but here's the thing. It's a privilege that we haven't had to force pivot to virtual right now. We have a bit of a runway that we can wait, and we haven't put anything out right now because we don't feel it's the right time for our audience. That's not to say that is not a comment on people who have been putting out content. Yeah. That is about us and where we're looking and what we feel is right for our audience and for us, because we have to take that into account too. We're not speakers. We're humans. We're humans that have been told to help humanity. We need to stay here, and this is the deal we're doing. But then it's a whole new world. This isn't working from home. Yeah. This is about staying home and trying to find a way if we can do work or not. This is staying home and trying to figure out that we're actually elementary school teachers now, and to find out all of these type of things. Right. That whatever you're doing right now to cope with what's going on, do that. Yeah. And don't feel guilty about not doing those things. And we haven't pivoted to it yet, but we will. I think we will. One of the things that we looked at, how revenue, like our entire revenue base right now is my keynotes. Yeah. We're a family of 7. And we have 7 people, 5, from 13 to 23 in this household. We have a commitment to do this. So the runway only goes so far, and you never want to wait till your end of your runway to try to take off. Right. And so we're planning this, but we're planning it with some strategy. But this is a privilege. And I think that a lot of times a virtual answer isn't the same as an in-person answer. Brian Fanzo, who commented on here too, has been great at showing that it's not the same thing. Right? It's not the same thing. And I appreciate that compliment, Brian. But it's not the same thing. Okay. It's not that virtual is not the same as a keynote, and it's a different way. And you can't be just, you have to get your reps in, just as I know you're a proponent of this too, Grant, that you need your reps. You got to get reps in. And if you and I know you've done more talks than I have in your career, and those reps are what make you that person on stage, that comfort, that connection with the audience. And then we go to virtual. You don't get to transfer those reps necessarily from the stage to your desk. Yeah. Right. It's a different rep. It's a different workout. It's a different muscle that we're trying to do. And we have to understand that it's a different thing. A lot of the times these webinars are more of a transfer of skills and knowledge, not necessarily, you're not kicking something off like a keynote or setting the tone. Like people are like, people are booking virtual, but it's for a lot of times it's transfer of skills. Okay, what to do next, how to handle this. And people are trying to sometimes squeeze this topic from over here into here. And that's not necessarily true. But we also have all these other skill sets that aren't necessarily our main talk or our main keynote that might be more applicable right now.
When with a lot of speakers who are transitioning and starting to try to do more virtual things, and even companies and events being more open to it, do you think that this is just like a temporary Band-Aid that everyone's like, let's scramble for virtual right now because we don't have a lot of other options? Or do you think like people are gonna be like, it's not the same, but maybe it's simpler. Maybe we don't have to have that meeting after all. Maybe it's it's more cost effective. Certainly trade-offs. You and I are guys that like we thrive on humor and story and interaction with the audience, and you cannot translate that into a virtual environment where you're sitting in your house right now. I'm sitting in my house right now. However many people are watching or listening right now, like we lose the energy of that experience. So do you think that virtual speaking is here to stay, or is this just kind of a passing fad?
I think the answer is in the middle somewhere. That forcing people down a certain road makes them see that road. But also we are very the only thing we're very adaptable with is not being flexible. Like we also like the old ways. Like what people are talking about right now is going back to it. One of the things that now there's the problem. One of the things right now is that a lot of people are comparing this to the recession or 9/11, where the travel was shut down and we had less meetings. And the problem was and again, this is just very a light comparison because it's a different situation. But with 9/11, it was an instance. It was an event. And they're like, shut it down, and then we feel safe, and people are coming in, and they're changing security things. But this is a different thing. This is months of being at home, and it makes people forced. It's the same question as saying, do you think now is everybody going to work from home in the future? Because right now, that's more than even events, right? Companies being forced to do what a lot of their workers have been telling them they wanted to do forever. Is to be able to work from home and save the commute and do all these things. So I think there's a middle here. I think it will be able to do somewhat events, but the most powerful part about events isn't even us. The speakers aren't the powerful part of events. It's the connection of the attendees. That's why they hold these things. It's why they have these things. And here goes the dogs for a second. So please, talking about at home, but yeah. Allison's back from our bi-weekly grocery shop, so the dogs she's the one, they love her. So you have this issue about that. I think there's going to be a new normal, but I don't think it's going to be entirely different from everything. Yeah. Which is, I think, somewhat that they can do certain gigs, certain things. I think the regional stuff will also be maybe be quicker to come back because there's smaller groups and there's smaller budgets and they're a little more flexible in stuff. But I think this has opened it up a bit. I think that's a good thing. I think traveling less is good for the world. It's good for the environment. It's bad for my business. But that's not the point. The point is it makes the world a better place if we can hop on a little, even for me, I would rather hop on some less airplanes. Not like this. But, this is like, I remember a year and a half ago, I'm like, I'm doing too many gigs, which is the worst thing in life to say. Right. But I'm like, it's too many. And I'm just like, no, I just want, like, I'm giving a speech on my front porch today. Nobody signed up for it yet, but I need to do it. Like we had the Seder last night with Allison's family, and we had everybody on the iPad, and I was reading one of the pages, and I'm like, I need a round of applause first, please. Like I need some kind of, because on speaking we get 2 rounds of applause when you walk out, when you walk off, and I need both, and I didn't get the exit applause, so I'm going to bring that up today. But I think there's a new normal, but I don't think it's going to be starkly new when it comes to this type of stuff. But I do really like the fact that people are showing how we can do this without having to go places.
Our speaker friend, Carrie Lorenz asked, or just brought this up, totally different skill set, talking about the virtual thing. To rush to that could be brand damaging in the long run. So to that end, I'm curious for speakers right now who are feeling a bit scrambled just from a financial perspective of going, none of us saw this coming, and maybe I have some runway, but not nearly as much runway as I'm going to potentially need in the future. So how would you advise speakers right now to be making decisions that is bringing income in and providing for the family, but not making like these like throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just like, I'm going to remodel my entire business. It's like, hang tight, take a deep breath. Let's take some precautions of what we need to do today, but you don't have to completely pivot your entire business based on this. So how would you advise a speaker to be thinking about both the short term of what needs to happen today, but also the long term, and not making rash decisions?
Make short term budget changes and keep them long term. It's like this is not speaking business, right? This is business. Yeah. And business is very simple. You either increase revenue or decrease expenses. And when the revenue is not coming in, there's the only other way to make your runway longer is to decrease the expenses. What we lived off of 2 months ago is greatly different than what I am living off of right now. And that's the thing is, and then we're going through this. And since it's an extended period of time, you're like, I can deal with this. right? I can live like certain points like this where we didn't have to. We went through all of our credit card statements, turning off even the small things. All those things add up to how long your runway is. Yeah. And then once your plane takes off again, then you can still keep it. Just like saying virtual is it here to stay or not? Well, budgeting, is it here to stay or not? We have to be smart with this type of stuff. And this is a big lesson. And this is the same thing that happened to me in the recession in 08. 07, but I wasn't smart about it leading up to it. This one I still wasn't 100% smart. But what we can't do right now, what I beg of you to do right now, is not to have hindsight regret, not to have that hindsight of you're judging your decisions based on the information you have now on a decision you made a month ago. Yeah. It's not going to do anybody any good. This stuff is updating, changing, shifting daily, hourly, sometimes with some information. So what you can't do is saying, I'm going to go, I can't believe what I decided a month ago. Yeah. 6 weeks ago, I'm ready to get on a plane and I'm doing 7 gigs in March. 5 days before a gig in Wisconsin, it was still on. Yeah. So like you really can't beat yourself up because we're adults and we're supposed to be doing these things. No, nobody has dealt with this. Nobody was ready for this type of thing. But it's smart to make decisions now that work during this and after this. Right. And that's about budgeting. That's about looking at things because contracts are going to change, looking at contracts coming in when they do come in, about deposits, because they're all getting scared as well because of what's just happened. We're all going through this, and there's this domino effect in our industry. An event pulls, if the hotel holds the contract hostage and tries to keep all the money, that hurts the association, which then hurts the members. But if the hotel doesn't have that money, they lay off people, and it hurts the catering staff, and it hurts this, and it's like it just goes bup, 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 bup. The event industry has such a trickle effect to economies that we're just one of those parts of it. Yeah. And we have to make those decisions based on businesses. I really want speakers right now to behave like businesses. And in a business crisis, what do? Right? We reduce expenses and look for other avenues of revenue. And maybe that's your new normal. Maybe mine is not a 5-figure keynote multiple times a month. Maybe so what we're looking at right now is I'm saying, where are my low-hanging fruit when it comes to potential revenue a little bit down the road? Yeah. And for us, it's a brand partnership, which we've done in the past. What have I done in the past that works well, that has testimonials, which has stuff that I can have credibility with? Well, it's like having sponsorships with our show and our lives and doing this. So it's not necessarily us taking our product and converting it to live. It's saying, hey, we can do this for your brand, actually. And one of the first comments in here was really important. Marcel says the virtual expos will be a thing. Speakers will still find work, which is a great point. But you have to look at it differently. Okay, because I agree with Marcel in here, but you have to understand this point here, is that you would pitch your services to a virtual expo, but I wouldn't pitch it to the association. Where you go after is you look at the places that are right now still trying to fill their funnel, their leads. So you look at an event, an association event that has a trade show. Those vendors, those sponsors still need leads for their business because their business isn't based on events, right? But their lead generation can be. So what we're looking at doing is going to some of the sponsors that we have relationships with and say, hey, if you still need the leads in the funnel, we can do a sponsored webinar for you. We can do a sponsored thing where either to your lead list, that's a warm lead, or to the general public, and you can push it out there, but trying to get those booth trade show type of things, because those trade show booths are ones usually that have the bigger budgets and they still have business outside of event-based stuff, which is really important. Right.
So I'm curious to that end of as you're saying, okay, all of a sudden I don't have any events, and I need to be thinking through some other ways that I can continue to serve and support clients that I either have worked with in the past or some events that have been postponed or rescheduled or still up in the air. How are you approaching some of these conversations with clients from two perspectives? One, again, knowing that I need to make revenue today or in the very, very near future. But at the same time, I don't want to, everyone that I'm potentially reaching out to make a financial buying decision for my product or service is also feeling this, which is, again, one of the unique things. It's not like, wow, a hurricane hit, New Orleans or something. No, this is affecting the world, So how are you having some of these conversations of saying, hey, here's other ways I can provide value, but at the same time being sensitive and aware and not tone deaf of okay, this is affecting them too. So how are you kind of approaching some of those conversations?
It's a gut check, right? When your gut's saying, oh, this might be too soon, you want to listen to it necessarily. That the problem is, again, it's a statement of privilege that we're not putting those messages out, right? You know what I'm doing right now? I'm reaching out to my contacts and asking how they're doing. Yeah. How are you all handling this? and not about pitching stuff, not about this. It's about saying, hey, because I've built that relationship and I give a damn about them. We're connected on LinkedIn and Facebook. I see their posts all the time and they're celebrating their kid's soccer trophy. And it says it's reaching out.
Yeah.
And this is about saying I can do something. So what I've been doing is, especially with the events that really clicked, that you know those gem events that just like you walk off, you're like, can I just come back next week again? Like
I just want to do this one over and over
again. And so I looked at like the 5 events last year that were just like my heartwarming ones that you just like, this is why I do it. And I reached out and said, hey, how are you all doing? And they're like, is this? And I look at the messaging they've been telling their people, their employees and stuff. And I said, could I record a video for the crew, for the team, for the employees, just to say hey, and say hey, just stay strong, and if it's in my wheelhouse, right? This isn't about, I'm not giving crisis counseling, I'm not doing this. It's that I was their keynote, and so I have a connection with them, and I can give them a little bit of humor or something if they want that, and every single one has been all caps excited for me to do that. This wasn't about me then sending them. This is not a strategy for me next week to send a message saying, now you want to hire me for virtual? It's about being human to each other. And then you have to lose the pride. The pride of the fact that if you can have a government assistance right now that you can get, then you get it. Yeah. If you can do a remote job and be an employee, then you do it. Like, this isn't about, well, I'm only a speaker and I'm okay. Speaking is a hard business on a normal day. Right. Speaking is a tough industry when everything is good. Yeah. And so we can't, like, if I, who's the most arrogant person about being a keynote speaker, that's all I do, and that's all I've ever done, and look at me, if I can admit that I am no longer a speaker, I'm an expert who used to get on stage and hopefully will in the future, then your brain pivots from what can my knowledge do to help others, and therefore I could potentially make revenue from it.
Yeah. This, you kind of alluded to the 2007, 2008 recession that certainly affected the speaking industry. Before that, there was 9/11. We will get through this. It's not a matter of if, but when. Events will come back. They may look slightly different, but there will be another side to this. So what are the lessons that you hope speakers learn from this, that they shift, that they adapt in their business going forward? So next time this hits, because this will be a next time, whether it looks to this scale or a slightly smaller scale or a bigger scale, something like this will happen again in the future, and it will affect speakers. What do you hope are the lessons that speakers learn and apply in the future?
Build your platform off stage. That it's such a big, you have got to dig that well. And when you only are a speaker, like you go to your site and it's just speaker, that the problem is then we only need you when I need a speaker, right? To be a leader in a topic, to be an expert who speaks. That's where you want to build it. And the problem right before this, right, when you speak and you speak for other companies, especially, it's almost like selling a book on Amazon. You leave, you have no way of getting in touch with them again, right? They buy a book on Amazon. I got no way to get in touch with them again. Yeah. And so the goal, and what I've been doing the past few years building up, has been to build that list from the stage, doing the text to sign up, building that warm list. So now when I reach out to them, their audience some of them has become part of my followers, my subscribers. Right. And so when this is all said and done, treat yourself as a business. You've got a virtual funnel, you've got a following, because the only time we look at that a lot of times is if we're launching a book or we're launching a video, or now we're launching a webinar and we wish we had lists for that. Treat the future when this is all said and done, and I agree with you, things will come back and events will. The question is when on the calendar they will. But still treat the importance of building your list and your expertise as your number one priority after this is all said and done as well. And I mean email list. It's not look, I started in social. I'm still a fairly influential social media person. I have a large following on a lot of the platforms, and I will still take 1,000 email addresses that opted in and signed up after hearing me speak than 10,000 followers on another platform.
Yeah. Let me ask you this to wrap up here. There's a lot of speakers who are watching or listening right now who are just scared. They're just nervous of this was my world and now it's gone. And this on both ends of the spectrum. I've heard from speakers who are, some of the top paid speakers in the industry who, like you mentioned, have just tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees that are just suddenly gone. And those who are early on in their career, who are doing I had a handful of gigs and I was moving in the direction of building myself as a professional speaker, and that's gone. And again, like we said, we all feel like, okay, optimistically, this is going to pass. But the challenge is we don't know. And so because of that, we find ourselves scared, nervous, fearful, anxious, worried.
Yeah.
What do you say to the speaker right now who's just worried, who's just not sure how this is going to play out, who's anxious and scared?
There's two pieces of advice I have. One, whatever you've done up to this moment and before this hit was not a waste. Okay, and I've heard that from a lot of people where they're just starting to get momentum. Momentum is very hard to build in speaking, and they're like, "I was getting momentum, I was doing this," but it doesn't mean that it's gone. When you come back, when you hit the stage again, it's not like you're starting again. You've had those reps, you built those relationships, and those were not all for naught. Yeah. Okay, so you haven't. There is no ending of momentum. It's paused. Okay, it's paused right now. So please have that, in your back pocket somewhere, because if once you think something's a waste, then it just eats away at you, and then you get that again. And it's something that we can't have to do that. And the second part is, yeah, I'm worried too. I'm freaking out too. I have good moments and bad moments. 2 days ago, I had 6 different mood swings, like in the waking hours. Like I've been a crumbling ball, a mess, crying. These like it whatever you're feeling right now, that's it. Okay, that's okay, and that you also know that this will eventually change.
Yeah.
We will get back, but act like you have it now. Stay the heck home if you're not essential services, and work on seeing what you can do then to give, to help. And we also control our own noise. That's a big part of this too. That I can spend 8 hours in a day just scrolling Twitter.
Yeah,
just scrolling Twitter, and I have to put the phone down sometimes. And I also don't want to not ever touch my phone. It also gives me some escape. But when you're saying this is all doom and gloom, we control that. Yeah. We control who we follow. We control what we read. If you want to be on Twitter and still get a feeling of that escapism, then go to a list, go to a sub list, and find something. Like, look at athletes and being ridiculous. Look at if you like the NBA, they're all playing 2K on their PlayStations and Xboxes. They're going to do a horse, like, escape that way.
Right.
But don't be afraid to mute somebody. Even if they're a relative and they're going off in a direction that is not helping your mental health, then mute them. The mute button is your greatest friend and ally at this point. Yeah. And plus, you don't have to see those people for for Easter right now, or for Passover, because you can just mute them virtually. It's great. I wish we could do that in person going forward, but we can't. So it's that we're in this together. And as somebody who is trying to establish themselves, is trying to lead part of the pack in speaking, I'm worried too.
Sure.
And that's okay. And that's natural. And if we weren't worried, we wouldn't love this industry.
Totally. And it seems like on the other side of this, that this will, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but I think it helps speakers who are really serious about this to come out on the other side, because there will be plenty of speakers who will not make it out on the other side. And that's not a knock against them in any way. They just decide, this just isn't for me. This isn't what I signed up for. It's not worth it. But there'll be speakers who are like, man, this sucks, but like, if I can get through this, I can make it as a speaker. And so I think there'll be a lot of speakers who just throw in the towel, who just decided it's not. And again, that's not a knock in any way, because again, we all have to feed our families and eat and live indoors. So make decisions that make the most sense for you.
But it's like announcing leaving Facebook. You don't retire from speaking. You're just not doing it for a while. You can pick it up whenever you want. There's no just final boom, and you're not doing that. It's simply that. For now, it's not the right thing. If you might want to do it down the road, great, but that can be your choice down the road. And this industry is kind of that way anyways, that you're a speaker when you say you are. And that's okay that you're not maybe doing it right now. And that's okay for me that I just shift my identity in my head. And it was the changing that identity was the hardest part for me. And that's should be okay.
Yeah. Scott, we appreciate the kind words of wisdom and encouragement as we all look into the magic crystal ball and make our best guess of how this is going to play out.
Exactly.
If at this moment right now, while we are quarantined and we don't know when the next events are, any strategies, any tips on growing a man bun? If we wanted to pursue that, it looks good back there.
Everybody's like, my hair's going to grow out. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is my natural state as well. The man bun is, you know what? It's a tough thing to pull. I don't pull it off. It's a really tough thing to pull off. So
it looks
have
good.
Some fun with that hair though. Just do your thing. Next time I come on, I'll do the side part with it, and I look like I'm right out of of Poison or something like that. It's brilliant, but not today. Not today.
Well, I think if we talk every month, every couple months or so, and we keep doing this, the longer this goes, the weirder we're all gonna look.
Yeah, how do you think this is gonna look in a couple months from now? Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna
Hey,
start folding it over my face. Yeah.
if people want to find out more about you, what you're up to, where can we go?
Yeah, most of my stuff's under the banner of unmarketing, so that's pretty much every platform we're on. And then Allison, my partner in crime, and luckily for me, my wife is also on those platforms. Allison on Twitter, or Allison Robin on Instagram. And then we're around. We're always accessible and available on all the platforms. And happy to talk to anybody in speaking that wants to ask questions. Drop me a line.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you, buddy.
Anytime, man.